They called me a powerhouse, a titan, Dr. Reed, the CEO who never slept. I was on magazine covers, my name synonymous with success. But every morning, before the world saw the severe haircut and the steel in my eyes, my first thought wasn't about the market or our stock price. It was a desperate, silent plea. Could I get enough air into my lungs to make it through the day? I was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire, and I was forgetting how to breathe. The applause was deafening, but the silence in my chest was louder.
That feeling of being at the absolute pinnacle of success, only to realize you're suffocating. It's a story too many women know in silence. Today, we're honored to share the profound journey of Dr. Evelyn Reed from California. She had it all, and she walked away to find herself. I'm Susan Bentley, and this is Unbroken Women, where we find strength in the stories that shatter us and then rebuild us piece by piece.
My world was a symphony of controlled chaos, and I was its conductor. The alarm blared at 4:45 a.m., not 5. Those 15 minutes were my edge. A black coffee, a scan of the Asian markets, and then into the armor, a tailored suit sharp enough to cut glass. My penthouse apartment overlooked the city, a sterile glass box filled with minimalist art and the ghosts of conversations I was too busy to have. The view was spectacular, but I only ever saw it as a backdrop for my video calls. My calendar wasn't a schedule, it was a weapon, booked in 10-minute increments from dawn until well past dusk. Board meetings, investor calls, product developments, press interviews. I thrived on the velocity. I loved the feeling of 10 things demanding my attention at once, the adrenaline of solving an impossible problem right before a deadline. It was validation. Every successful quarter, every fawning article in a business journal was another brick in the fortress I was building around myself. I told myself I was building an empire. I had a driver, a personal assistant who managed my life down to the brand of sparkling water in my fridge, and a legion of employees who both feared and respected me. I was the woman who had shattered the glass ceiling, but the truth was, I was living under it. Trapped in a beautiful, soundproof room of my own making, unable to hear the sound of my own heart. Beneath the surface of this relentless efficiency was a constant low-grade hum of panic. It started in my stomach and radiated up into my chest, a tightness that never fully went away. I mistook it for drive. I called it ambition, but it was fear. Fear of stopping. Fear of what I might find in the silence. So I used productivity as a sedative. If I was working, I wasn't feeling. If I was closing a deal, I wasn't confronting the gnawing emptiness. I was the only woman on my board, and the pressure to be infallible was immense. I couldn't just be good, I had to be legendary. I couldn't show weakness, couldn't admit to exhaustion. Every decision felt like it carried the weight of my entire gender. This weight was invisible. To my colleagues, I was unflappable. To the world, I was an icon. But inside, I was just a woman carrying a mountain, pretending it was a pebble. The first cracks were small, almost unnoticeable. One evening, stuck in traffic, I looked out the window of my town car and saw a woman my age, sitting on a park bench, laughing with a friend over a container of takeout. It was such a simple, ordinary moment, but it struck me with the force of a physical blow. When was the last time I had laughed like that? A genuine, uncalculated laugh, not the polite, strategic one I used in negotiations. I couldn't remember. Another time, my sister sent me a photo of her daughter's first art show. My niece was standing there, beaming, next to a messy, vibrant painting of a sunflower. I had promised I would be there. I'd had my assistant send an extravagant gift instead, citing an unavoidable board dinner. Looking at that photo, a wave of profound shame washed over me. I was building a legacy, but I was absent from my own life. These moments were whispers, a quiet voice from a part of myself I had long since silenced, asking a dangerous question. If you have everything you ever wanted, why aren't you happy? The whispers became a scream on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office, a glass-walled sanctuary on the 40th floor, deep in a quarterly earnings report. I hadn't eaten since a handful of almonds that morning. My heart was doing a strange staccato rhythm against my ribs, a familiar side effect of too much caffeine and too little sleep. I remember looking at the spreadsheet, and the numbers started to swim, blurring into meaningless gray lines. A sharp, searing pain shot up my left arm. My first thought, ridiculously, was annoyance. I don't have time for this. I tried to stand up, to shake it off, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The room tilted violently. And the last thing I remember was the cool, hard surface of the Italian marble floor rushing up to meet me. I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the steady, intrusive beeping of a machine. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room were merciless. My suit was gone, replaced by a thin, humiliating gown. A kind-faced doctor with tired eyes stood over me. He didn't mince words. "Dr. Reed," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "you didn't have a heart attack, but you are on the fastest possible track to having one. Your body is in a state of catastrophic exhaustion. It isn't asking for a break anymore. It's screaming for one." Lying there, tethered to monitors, I felt a kind of terror I had never known. I had built my life on the illusion of being indestructible. In an instant, that illusion was shattered. My body, the one thing I had taken for granted and punished for years, had finally staged a rebellion I couldn't ignore. They sent me home a day later with a stack of prescriptions and a stern order to take 2 weeks off. 2 weeks! It felt like a lifetime sentence. Back in my silent penthouse, the denial machine kicked into high gear. It was a fluke, a one-off. I just pushed a little too hard. I'll start delegating more. I'll take up yoga. I'll sleep a full 6 hours instead of 4. I bargained with myself, with the universe, with anyone who would listen. I started making lists, turning my recovery into another project to be managed efficiently. But underneath the rationalizations, a deeper, colder fear was taking hold. The fear wasn't about my health. It was about my identity. Who was Dr. Evelyn Reed if she wasn't a CEO? My entire sense of self-worth was welded to my title, my achievements, my relentless pace. The thought of stepping off the treadmill wasn't just scary. It felt like annihilation. What would people say? That I couldn't handle the pressure? That I was weak? The narrative I had carefully constructed for 2 decades, the Iron Woman, the powerhouse, was threatening to crumble, and I was terrified of the empty space it would leave behind. The silence in my apartment was no longer just quiet. It was accusatory. It echoed with the hollowness of a life built on work and nothing else. My breaking point didn't happen in a boardroom or a hospital. It happened on a Thursday evening, about a week into my forced vacation. I was standing in the middle of my enormous living room, staring at a piece of abstract art on the wall that had cost more than a car. The city lights twinkled below, a sea of diamonds that felt a million miles away. My apartment was perfect, spotless, designed by a famous architect. Every object was placed with intention, and it was utterly, completely empty of life. There were no scuff marks on the floor, no half-read books on the table, no pictures of loved ones on the shelves. It wasn't a home. It was a showroom, a beautiful, sterile cage. In that moment, the full weight of my choices crashed down on me. I had sacrificed everything for this. My relationships, my health, my joy. I had chased success so relentlessly that I had forgotten to build a life. A single tear rolled down my cheek, then another, and then I just collapsed. I slid down the wall onto the cold marble floor and sobbed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a silent, gut-wrenching cry of a woman who had finally realized that she had won the whole world and lost her own soul in the process. I wasn't crying for my health. I was mourning the woman I might have been. After the tears stopped, an eerie calm settled over me. It was the quiet that comes after a devastating storm. In the wreckage of my emotional collapse, one thought emerged with stunning, terrifying clarity. I can't go back. Not to the 4:45 a.m. alarms, not to the endless meetings, not to the person who measured her worth in stock points. To go back wasn't just undesirable, it felt like a death sentence. And so, I made a decision. A decision so radical, it felt like heresy. I was going to step down. I wasn't just going to take a break. I was going to walk away. The thought was so terrifying, it made me nauseous. It felt like a betrayal of everyone who believed in me, of every woman I was supposed to be representing. But for the first time in years, it also felt like my own. It was a choice made not from ambition or fear, but from a desperate, primal need for self-preservation. It was the first choice I had made for Evelyn, and not for the CEO. The next day, I called an emergency board meeting. I dressed in my usual armor, but it felt like a costume. Walking into that boardroom, the one I had dominated for years, I felt like a stranger. I looked at their faces, all men, all expecting me to present a recovery plan, a strategy for my return. I took a deep breath, the air feeling foreign and thick in my lungs. And then I said the words. I'm taking an indefinite sabbatical, effective immediately. The silence was deafening. It was followed by a flurry of confused questions, of concerned platitudes that barely veiled their panic. I didn't explain everything. I couldn't. How do you explain that your soul is dying? I just repeated my decision, my voice steady even as my hands trembled under the table. When I walked out of that room, leaving my security pass and company phone on the polished mahogany table, it was the most terrifying and liberating moment of my life. The city looked different. The air smelled different. For the first time in 20 years, my calendar was completely, utterly empty. I was untethered, floating in a vast, terrifying sea of uncertainty. The world did not react with quiet understanding. The pushback was immediate and intense. My phone, my personal one, started ringing off the hook. The chairman of the board called, his voice dripping with condescending concern. Evelyn, you're just tired. Take a month. We can't afford to lose you right before the merger. It wasn't a request. It was a demand wrapped in a compliment. Another board member implied that my decision was emotional, hormonal even. He suggested I see a doctor, a therapist, anyone who could fix me and get me back to work. Then the articles started. The business journals that once praised my genius now ran speculative pieces. Is Dr. Reed cracking under pressure? Biotech giant stumbles as visionary CEO abruptly steps down. They painted me as unstable, erratic, a liability. Friends from the industry sent texts that felt more like interrogations. Are you okay? Really meant, what is wrong with you? Each call, each article was a hook trying to pull me back into the life that had almost killed me. They weren't just questioning my decision, they were questioning my sanity. The pressure was immense, a coordinated campaign to make me believe that my only value, my only worth, was tied to that corner office. It was a brutal, relentless assault on the fragile resolve I was trying so desperately to hold on to. But the external resistance was nothing compared to the war raging inside my own head. My inner critic, a voice I had honed into a sharp weapon for my career, now turned on me. Failure. Quitter. You threw it all away. You let everyone down. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. For 20 years, my answer to the question, "What do you do?" was my shield. Now, I had no answer. The silence that followed that simple question felt like a judgment. I was adrift. The structure and validation that had defined my existence were gone, and I didn't know who I was without them. I would wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, convinced I had made a catastrophic mistake, that I had destroyed my life with one impulsive decision. The familiar pain of my old life started to seem comforting compared to the terrifying void of this new, undefined existence. About a month in, I hit rock bottom. The initial relief had evaporated, replaced by a profound, crushing aimlessness. The days stretched before me, vast and empty. I'd wander through my silent apartment like a ghost, the city skyline outside my window feeling like a monument to a life that was no longer mine. The loneliness was an ocean, and I was drowning in it. One afternoon, the despair was so total, so absolute, that I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the chairman's contact information. I could end this. I could call him, apologize, say I'd had a moment of weakness, and beg for my old life back. The thought of returning to the crushing schedule, the endless demands, was awful, but it felt less terrifying than this shapeless, purposeless freedom. I was a breath away from making the call, from surrendering completely, from choosing the familiar prison over the terrifying emptiness. I believed, in that moment, that I had failed. I had tried to find a new way to live, and all I had found was nothing. I don't know why I didn't press call. Instead, on some strange impulse, I booked a ticket to a remote yoga retreat my sister had mentioned months ago. It was a last, desperate act. It was there, sitting on a simple wooden porch overlooking a quiet valley, that I met an older woman with kind, knowing eyes. She was a retired judge. We were sipping herbal tea, and without any prompting, she just started talking. "I ran my courtroom like a fortress for 30 years, she said softly. "My ambition almost cost me my soul, too." She spoke of her own burnout, her own painful journey of rediscovering herself outside of her gavel and ropes. She didn't offer advice or platitudes. She just offered her story. And in her story, I saw my own. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a CEO, not as a failure, but as a woman on a difficult path. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a flicker, a tiny warm spark in the cold darkness of my despair. It was just enough to make me put the phone away. The climb back wasn't a sprint. It was a slow, deliberate crawl. It started with small acts of rebellion against my old self. I bought a set of watercolor paints, something I'd loved as a teenager. My first attempts were clumsy, childlike, but the feeling of creating something just for the joy of it, with no metric for success, was revolutionary. I started going for long walks without my phone, learning to just be in the world instead of trying to conquer it. The hardest step was reconnecting. I called my sister and apologized, truly apologized. We cried together on the phone for an hour. I learned to set boundaries. When old colleagues called, I learned to say, "I'm not discussing work right now." Each small act was a stitch, slowly weaving together a new identity. I wasn't Dr. Reed, the CEO, anymore. I was just Evelyn. And I was slowly, painstakingly learning what that meant. It was terrifying, and it was the most beautiful work I had ever done. Eventually, I started a small consulting firm from a sunlit room in a new, much smaller apartment. I help other high-achieving women navigate the treacherous waters of burnout. My work is no longer driven by a relentless need to prove my worth, but by a deep sense of compassion and purpose. Some days I work for 4 hours, and then I go paint or meet a friend for coffee. The old me would have called that laziness. The new me calls it balance. The tightness in my chest is gone. I can breathe again, deeply. The real victory isn't the success of my new business, it's the quiet peace I feel when I wake up in the morning. It's knowing that my value isn't tied to my productivity. It's the radical, unshakable acceptance of my own authentic self. If I could speak to that woman in the glass tower, the one running on fumes and ambition, I would wrap my arms around her. I would tell her, I see you. I see how hard you're fighting. But this isn't the only way. I'd tell her that success without a soul is just noise. Your worth isn't in what you produce, but in who you are becoming. The bravest thing you will ever do is not to build an empire, but to tear down your own prison, wall by wall, and walk out into the sun.
Thank you, Evelyn, for that incredibly powerful and honest testimony. Redefining our own meaning of success is one of the bravest journeys a woman can take. If her story resonated with you, please share your own experience in the comments below. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Unbroken Women for more stories of resilience. And click the video on your screen right now to hear another woman's journey from breaking down to breaking through.